You're listening to EdTech Heroes, a podcast that looks at how teachers in today's classrooms can use technology to improve student learning. In each episode, a hero in the world of education will share their story and discuss how innovation can influence the minds of the next generation. Let's jump in.
Hey y'all, and welcome to EdTech Heroes. I am your host, Nef, and today I'm excited to be joined by Sarah Moon. Sarah is an elementary instructional coach and interventionist with Durham Public Schools in Durham, North Carolina. She also has a background in special education and a master's degree in adult education. She is also a mentor at the Modern Classrooms Project. Sarah, welcome to EdTech Heroes.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited that you're here. I mentioned that you are a part of MCP, and Kareem Farah was the very first guest that we ever had on EdTech Heroes. So it feels like this kind of cool full circle movement where we get to talk to you now, and the show has hopefully gotten better for listeners who have been with us since the beginning. And maybe some of the things that you liked from that first episode are still here. I don't know. It's really cool to have you on.
Thank you.
So we got this interesting perspective of hearing about MCP from the person that literally founded it. But it would be interesting to hear a little bit about what MCP's mission is to you as someone who is living that out, but was not there from literal day one. So what is MCP about? What's the mission? What are you doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been with MCP for about 2 years now. I actually was one of those cohorts that got to talk to Kareem at the beginning before we went in. And I always, whenever people ask me about Modern Classroom Project, I always tell them that I'm also one of those mentees that didn't know I was getting involved. There was a whole cohort of us within our districts that were hired to write blended learning curriculum. And we were told, hey, let's have an initial meeting. And we all thought it was going to be you do third grade ELA, you do third grade math, that sort of thing. And instead, Kareem was there and we were explained, hey, you're going to go through the virtual mentorship and this is the Modern Classroom Project. And all of us teachers are texting one another like, what? What are we doing? And so, going from that to working and absolutely loving them, I think really speaks to the Modern Classroom Project, right? Because the Modern Classrooms Project is all about making learning accessible. And I would also say sustainable, right? Both for the teacher and the student side. When we think about the three main tenets of Modern Classrooms, which would be our self-paced, mastery-based, and our blended instruction. So when we think about those three tenets, right, they're all built upon that idea of access. How can I make sure that all of my students are accessing instruction? How can I make sure that all of my students are accessing opportunities, not only to access that instruction, but to understand that instruction, right? Because we know that all students don't learn at the same pace. We know that all students don't learn the same way. But then on the other hand of that is how can we make that work for educators, right? I always say MCP is the reason I'm still in public ed, because I went to MCP at a time that was a little rough. It's in the middle of pandemic, which made it even more rough, right? And really and truly, MCP just kind of brought together so many things that educators, whether you teach pre-K or whether you teach at a senior center, that we talk about all the time about differentiation and student-centered learning and just making education work, right? Because at the end of the day, education is a lot, right? There's a reason that this podcast is called EdTech Heroes, right? And so how can we really make it work, not only for our students, but also for our educators, so that way it's sustainable and that way our educators are staying within our buildings and are staying and doing this incredible work every day.
That is important. And I kind of don't want to step over that, because I think that there is this crucial conversation that we're having right now in education about how we kind of keep teachers in classrooms, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that we think about changing curriculum or the delivery of that curriculum as one of those crucial factors in making education sustainable. So I want to ask you to elaborate a little bit there. How does MCP really change the way in which instructional delivery occurs, and how does that make teaching more sustainable? It almost sounds like you're saying that MCP talked you off the ledge. Tell me about that. What was so different about this approach?
Well, first off, I do want to pause and say that's exactly what MCP did. And I've never thought of it as talking me off the ledge, but now I want to get a t-shirt or something with it, just so that when I'm mentor, be like, are you on the ledge? It's okay. Let's talk. I have some ideas about that. But I think what MCP again, MCP, I think, is nothing necessarily new, right? MCP did not create blended instruction. They did not create mastery-based. They didn't create self-paced instruction. But I do think that the beauty of it is it brings all of those crucial elements together in a way that makes sense. And so I think, if we start with the accessing the instruction, blended instruction can be such a critical part of making sure that all students access instruction, right? Because you have the kiddo that is late all the time because they have transportation issues. You have that kiddo that is experiencing a lot of transition within their home life, so they're not there a lot. You have that kiddo that, they had a doctor's appointment and they just missed 3 hours out of the day, right? We have all of these things that happen that most are completely outside of that kiddo's control, right? And then when they come back, okay, I have to catch you up, right? And not only I have to catch you up, but I have to take, let's say a kiddo missed 3 days. I have 10 minutes to catch you up. So I'm just going to magically cram all that together. It doesn't work. And we know it doesn't work, right? And so I think really kind of finding that balance between how can I make sure that students are accessing instruction and how can I as a teacher really reach my students? Because I think at the end of the day, that's one of the biggest, I don't want to say complaints because it is not a complaint, one of the biggest valid reasons for frustration within a classroom, right? Because as an educator, I am dealing with this and I am dealing with that. And then they intercom me because I haven't done my attendance because I always forget my attendance. And then there's this and then there's that, right? And at the end of the day, I think so many of us went into education because we want to teach students, right? I want to have that aha moment with a student. I want to be able to sit and be like, hey, knows that you're having trouble subtracting. Let's work it out, you and me. But when we think about the traditional method, and when I say traditional method, I mean, teacher up at the board, teaching, lecturing style, it's very difficult to have those true one-on-one small group moments just because you're so caught up in everything else and you're having to be that sage on the stage. You're having to lead everything. And so I think then when you bring in self-paced, mastery-based, blended instruction, then you're really able to not only, again, make sure that students have that access, but you as a teacher are able to have those moments. I always share with mentees, I will never forget the first time that I was able to, we were moving and grooving, doing everything as we needed with Modern Classroom. About 2-3 weeks in, I realized all of my students were engaged and they were working. And I could literally just take a moment to just bask in it and just know at that moment, every single one of my students was actively learning something that they needed to learn. And that was huge. And I had never really had that moment before. And like you said, my background's in special ed. Differentiation is kind of the name of the game in special ed. So I think that speaks even more to say that when I went to gen ed, when I was able to do the Modern Classrooms method, really being able to find that joy and feeling like I was really reaching students and that students were truly leaving each day knowing more than they had the day before.
Totally. I've shared on the podcast before that I used to teach 7th grade civics, and I had a supplemental class for students who struggled a bit with reading. And the thing is, obviously, when we think about sort of these core subjects like civics, it requires quite a bit of reading comprehension.
Oh, yeah.
And there was not really a day where I left and I felt like there was at least one kid that I struggled to reach. And usually it was multiple. And that is so demoralizing. And I totally get where you were at, right? You're like, I am trying my hardest. I am putting my literal blood, sweat, and tears into this every single day. And still, I'm not reaching the pinnacle of what success is. And it's tough. So I think when we have these very real ways in which we can differentiate and reach every student, we have all of them engaged, it becomes sort of this moment where the skies have opened up and you're like, man, this is what teaching can be. How awesome is this? So I love that you sort of characterized it that way, because I feel like everybody listening has been at least at that breaking point where you're like, what in the heck do I have to do? So I know there are 3 tenets of Modern Classrooms project, and 2 of those are that self-paced aspect and that mastery-based aspect. And what sort of undergirds a lot of that self-paced portion of it is being able to use video in the classroom. So can you talk a little bit about how video plays a part in this panacea of education that you found?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love to just to kind of bounce off of something that you said, play a part, right? Because I think a lot of
Mm,
times when we talk about blended instruction, when we talk about using instructional videos, you always get the pushback of like, well, I don't want kids just to watch videos. And it's like, whoa, right? Using it as a tool, using it as a powerful part
sure.
of the tool, of the overall toolbox, I guess I should say. And I think what we can do with instructional videos is we frequently say at MCP, you clone yourself, right? Because at the
Hmm.
end of the day, it is you making that video, right? It's you connecting with that kiddo and you also knowing how your kiddos need to learn through that video, right? If you know that you have a class that, using your seventh grade civics example, is going to need some reading support, tailoring that video using that, right? Using
Mm,
tools, and we won't get into it yet. I bet we will later, using tools such as Screencastify to go ahead and do that. But really using that video to clone yourself for those big ticket things. I always tell teachers, you're not going to video all of your instruction in a day. But what you can do is think about what are those things that I teach over and over and over? And what are those
mm,
things that I know kiddos need to see a couple times, right? Because then when that video is there, they can see it the initial time that they learn it. Hey, I'm having trouble with this problem. Hey, let me watch that video and watch Miss Moon talk me through it. I also think that video instruction can be a powerful connection between the school and the home. I always upload all my Screencastify videos to YouTube. And I have a lot of caregivers always tell me that, like, hey, when my kiddo comes home talking about the three branches of government, and I'm like, what? Guess where I go? I go to Ms. Moon's YouTube channel and I'm able to watch that, right? I'm able to see those math strategies. I'm able to directly see into my students' instruction and really being able to support in that way. So, all of that tangent to say, I think video instruction, again, just goes back to that overall theme of access, right? Really allowing students
hmm.
to access instruction, to access your instruction in different times that work for them. It's also super helpful once review time comes around because I have this huge bank of videos that we can use for differentiated review instead of me trying to think about how to do 20 different pathways for review.
Very cool. And I'm hearing a little bit of emphasis on your video. I think that you said that a couple of times in your response. And
Probably.
I think that is a fundamentally different approach for MCP than perhaps other teachers who might utilize video. And it's not that y'all are throwing shade on the Bill Nyes or the Khan Academies
Love Bill
or
Nye.
anything of that nature. But I'm curious, why is it so important that the video is made by the teacher? I think you alluded to that, but I want to dive in a little bit more there.
I think it's really just the degree of customization, right? Because just like you said, we're
Mm,
not throwing shade. There's going to be great Bill Nye videos that are going to be able to do way cooler science stuff than Miss Moon and her budget will ever be able to do. But it's that customization, right? Like we know that as teachers, we understand where our kiddos need to go, right? We understand from data what do they
mhm,
need to learn? How am I going to do that? Especially our teachers, I think often some of our more veteran teachers can sometimes be like, oh, okay, I've kind of been doing what I've been doing, which I totally get because y'all have earned it because you've been in the classroom longer than I've been alive, some of y'all. But then thinking about because of that, y'all are superstars, right? You know how to teach kids. And so then utilizing that strength into video form, right? And I think it's really just
mm,
that customization. So if I know that my kiddos are doing a lot of misconceptions around decomposing with subtraction, I can make a specific video that addresses that misconception. And I can make it real quick because I know how to teach that versus having to search for a video that kind of connects to it, right? I also think just that relational capacity is huge, right? It's going to be a lot different seeing my teacher teach it versus seeing some voice on the
mhm.
screen. We've all done those bloodborne pathogen videos. We've all done the playground safety videos that you have to do every single year. And all of us think the same thing about them, right? And it's because we don't know those people that did it, right? Like that's just that training video that they make me do, right? Versus if it was somebody that I know, right? That relational capacity can really up that engagement as well.
Yeah, totally, totally. And kind of talked about this a little bit before. I have a feeling that you have some Screencastify secret sauce. So
I love
outside
Screencastify.
of sort of outside of that engagement that just authentically happens when we see somebody on screen that we know, what are some of the other pragmatic tips that you're using to reach that level of engagement where every kid is really engaged in instruction?
Yeah, well, the first thought that came to my mind is the on-screen annotating. Absolutely love the
Mm,
on-screen annotating tool. But then it's my handwriting versus, a very pretty, software. I am not a very good drawer. I will be the first to admit it. And it just came to my mind. I did a water cycle video one year for my fifth graders, and I was drawing the parts of the water cycle. And it wasn't that great, but one of my babies paused my instruction, and I had used the Screencastify on-screen annotating tool on my touchscreen laptop to do it. And he was like, "Miss Moon, I think your drawing skills have really improved." And I was like, "Well, thank you, love. They haven't, but I so appreciate you being kind and saying that." But again, right? Like that's that connection, right? It wasn't me
mhm,
programming, all of this stuff. And I always tell teachers too, you see gorgeous videos, right? You mentioned like Khan Academy. They do gorgeous videos because they have people that are hired to do that, right? At the end of the day, kids don't want perfect, they want you. And so being able to use that video in the corner, y'all have probably noticed if you're watching the video version of this, I talk with my hands a lot. Being able to talk with my hands still within a video instruction, being able to draw
mhm.
on the screen, right on the screen. Screencastify has some cool stickers, every now and then I'll shout out one of my kiddos. There was one baby that loved what is it, like the 100 sticker? You know what I'm talking about?
Mhm.
Like I'm probably not calling it
Yep.
the right thing, but I would sometimes, as I'm recording, be like, "Oh, shout out to," I won't say their name, but shout out to my kiddo who wanted me to do the 100. Let's make sure we get 100 on our practice. But again, just being able to really customize that. And I think with the video and with being able to record your voice, right? Like your own voice, it becomes a conversation, right? It becomes that small group table lesson versus, "Oh, we are recording and it is very prim and proper. And I have this video recording software." I'm able to record myself teach, which can be so powerful, right? Because it's me teaching, it's that relationship that I already have
Mhm.
with my students, but they can have it in the classroom, they can have it on the playground, they can have it during specials, they can have it at home, right? They can have it wherever they have that video connection.
Totally. And I think that you're uniquely positioned to answer this question. You are working with adult learners, and then you're also working with elementary learners. How does that customization piece differ, and how are those videos different? And maybe there's somebody who's listening who's like, all right, cool. Like your elementary student really liked your messed up drawings on the water cycle, but I'm dealing with 17-year-olds in high school, and maybe they want to hear a little bit about what you're doing for those adult learners. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about how you customize based on your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I just lift up your kids don't want perfect, they want you, right? I have never taught high school. High school
Okay.
is the one thing I will not touch. Love middle school. I just don't want to even deal with high school. Y'all are saints for who does high school. My brother is one of them. But again, like you might have some really cool stuff that you do with your 17-year-olds. That's what you do with my adult learner, which is
Mm,
primarily my educators that I help support as an instructional coach. We really use our instructional videos to help support our professional development. So like we rolled out a new guided reading leveling system this year. And so I not only did a live training, but then there's also a self-paced blended instruction training that they could go back to after they've had time to process. Hey, I can't remember how we do this. Oh, there's a video right there for it. And I think
mhm,
mostly with my adult learners, I'm just a little bit more put together. And it's mostly just because that takes a little bit more thought, right? And I think it really just depends on what you're doing, right? Because I would say my ELA
mhm.
subject matter videos are much more put together than my math ones. Because my math ones, I can kind of go, I hate to say off the cuff, but like if we're multiplying with the area model, we can just roll and we can go ahead and do it. Versus maybe with my ELA ones, I have to know what questions I'm going to ask. What text structures am I going
Mhm,
to, really model? And same with my adult learners, right? If I'm teaching to a specific learning target, really being intentional with my learning pathways as well with my adult learners, because with our kids, of course, we always want to be intentional, right? I want to make sure that my
Mhm.
videos are getting them from where they are to where they want to be. But I think with adult learners and as really learners just in general get up in age, we have a lot more responsibilities, right? When my adult learners engage, they are also parents and they are caregivers and they are teachers and they are spouses and they are this and they are that, right? Like a lot of hats. So we really have to make sure
Sure.
that I'm being efficient with their time, just really being thoughtful with that time too. So that's why I would say I think those are a little bit more polished, more thought out, because I'm really being intentional with that, making sure that, how can I be as efficient as I can be? And so there's a little bit more prior planning. Now, is that to say that some of my elementary ones should not have more prior planning? No, but it is to say that it is okay if sometimes you record a video right before you roll it out because life happens and that's okay.
Totally, totally. And I think what I'm hearing, at least, is that what makes a good video is intensely knowing your audience, right? Like you've talked through that in lots of examples. You've got this kiddo who loves the 100 sticker, so you're throwing that in, and that's a tidbit of engagement. Or you know that there's going to be an adult learner who is watching this video in between cooking dinner and going to a grad school class and grading papers. So you want to make it as short and concise as possible while giving all of that information because you have all of that context. So to me, that seems like the secret, right? Like it's not that one group needs something that is categorically different. It is that each of them needs you to be cognizant of who they are and what they need. Does that seem fair? Am I getting
Absolutely.
it?
I think that's absolutely fair. And I think at the basis of that, that's the
Very.
teaching, right? I mean, like, whether it's
Mhm.
traditional or whether it's blended, you need to know your audience. And as much as we can customize for them, we should.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you say that, right? Because I think that lots of folks who rail against the idea of using video in the classroom, and you talked a little bit about this group earlier, one of their pet peeves or their problems is that it might take us away from this idea of good teaching that is founded in individualization and knowing our students. And it seems like from what you're describing that this, as one instructional strategy in an entire toolbox, is actually the opposite of that, right? It gives us that time and that place to be able to really, really know our students and to be able to act on it. So I don't know. Like, I don't know what the question is there, but I feel like there's this realization that I'm having right now. Are you with me here? Is this just a Nef thing? What's going on
No,
here?
I think it is. And I think that's what we see. I mean, myself as a mentee, when I first went through Modern Classroom Projects
Hmm.
mentorship program, and we see it with a lot of implementers in general, right? Kind of going away from this idea of like, videos, okay, this is what we'll do, to like, wow, like this is changing my classroom for the better. And I think part of it is because all of us have gone through the pandemic and are still going through the pandemic. And a lot of educators came from a time where education, and I put education in quotes for those of us that are just listening to the audio part of it, was that one kiddo singular within the screen, right? And they were just kind of
Hmm.
maybe connected on Zoom, maybe not, but like it was a very solo endeavor, right? And although that was that time, that is not what video instruction and blended instruction has to be, nor would I say it should be. Right. And so really, again, you bring up that idea of the tool and the toolbox again. How can we utilize this tool the most effective way? Right. And just like with all tools, I'm not going to use it exclusively, right? If I just have a hammer in my toolbox, it's not gonna serve me very well when I have a screw, right? Like, it's just not.
Sure.
If I only use blended instruction, am I gonna be able to build as much community as I would with maybe some whole group activities? No, but I can utilize blended instruction. I can utilize my made instructional videos to really help my students learn specific parts of my content, right? And again, it all goes back to that access. How can we increase access? When you were talking about the adult learner that's, listening to that video between grad school and dishes and putting the kids to bed and grading papers, right? That's also so many of our families. And again, that goes to that homeschool
Mm-hmm.
connection. It's difficult for many, many families to be fully involved in their students' education if we're thinking about full involvement being like, oh, I'm going to come to the school all the time. And oh, I'm going to sit and do your homework with you, right? Because life is a lot for a lot of people, right? Because you got kids to
Mhm.
feed and you got jobs and you got the laundry is dinging and you have all of this other stuff. And so also when we think about what a powerful connection an instructional video can be, if I can teach a strategy that I want my students to use in 3 minutes, most parents find 3 minutes if I tell them like, hey, this is a really important strategy. I know it's a little
Mhm.
busy right now. Here's the link to the video. When you have a chance, watch this 3 minute video and then let me know what questions you have, right? That's a powerful connector because they can watch it in between cooking dishes. I've had some parents, they'll say, oh, I watched it while I was waiting in the carpool line, being able to really find those opportunities for connection, I think is huge, not only with our students, but also with their caregivers.
Yeah, for sure, right? And I think that lots of times I'll put myself out there, and I think other teachers have complained about lack of parent involvement in the classroom. And I think there is not a parent in the world, for the most part, that doesn't want to be more involved, right? But I
Exactly.
think the reality of life is that things are going to happen. So when we are able to come to a parent and say, hey, I'm not asking you to come sit in an open house that is available one time a year, right in the middle of your shift. What I'm saying is that there is this asynchronous activity that you can make fit your schedule instead of the opposite, which I think we often ask of parents.
Yes.
That is so powerful. And I think there are two opportunities to create that connection. One, in them actually watching the video, and that's so cool and so important. But I would argue that even in offering this alternate modality for that parent to be a part of the classroom, even that act alone is a way to strengthen that relationship to get parents invested in the classroom. So I'm glad that you've brought parents into the conversation as well.
Yeah, well, and I think it also empowers our caregivers too, right? Because like, especially as we get to middle school math's a little tricky sometimes, right? Or even middle school civics. I don't remember everything that I learned in middle
Mhm.
school civics. And so not just saying, hey, we're doing parabolas. Help your kid with parabolas. And they're thinking like, parabolas? What? What is that again? Being able to empower and be like, this is exactly how I want you to help them, right? This is the exact strategy when I'm talking about citizenship in civics. Can you tell that I haven't taught civics? Because I'm digging kind of deep for some civic sort of terms. But like when we're talking about that standard, what do I need? Right? This is what I mean. This is the exact information that your kid needs to know. I'm helping you
Mhm.
understand it. And then also giving that as a jumping off point for conversations, right? I'm not just saying again, hey, we're working on parabolas and that's what Nef needs to work on. Nef's, mom, dad, aunt, whoever that important caregiver is can be like, hey, when we watched your video, we were confused about this part. Can you explain more? How can I help with that part? And I think that can also, again, just like you said, that gives that opportunity and it gives that concrete opportunity.
Totally. So I want to rewind back in time a little bit. So this summer, which probably feels like it's been years ago and not a couple of months ago, you were a Screencastify presenter for the Modern Classrooms Project
Sure.
Virtual Summer
Yeah.
Institute sessions. So can you tell me a little bit about what that experience was like and what teachers took away from that? What I think from the look of your face was a pretty dope summer activity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I say every single summer, we've done it 2 summers so far, and I know we will continue, but the Modern Classroom Project does something called VSI or Virtual Summer Institute. And basically, it's our mentorship on steroids. So not only do you have that mentoring part where you get to go ahead and create your first Modern Classroom unit, but we also have a variety of workshops and webinars that we can really dive in. Some of our expert mentors with some of our seasoned implementers about some of the nuts and bolts of implementing. And so
Mm,
one of those is blended instruction and specifically the what behind the blended instruction. So when I say blended instruction, what am I using? What are the tools? How do I make it work? How do I make it sustainable? And so within that workshop, we also go into some breakout rooms about specific tools. And I was the one that did the Screencastify session because I adore Screencastify. And it's a big tool that we typically recommend to implementers, especially those that are at the beginning stages of kind of exploring screen recording and everything. And most of that is just because Screencastify is really user friendly, right? It's really easy to kind of pick up, it's easy to explore. It's very affordable, whether you do the free version, which is very nice, or you decide to go pro. And so it's just really a good first step for a lot of people. And I think one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that we saw over and over in the sessions, because we did 6 of them, if I remember correctly, this summer, but over and over in the sessions was just being able to experience the tools as a user and really seeing just how easy the tools are. We see these, we kind of talked about them, like the gorgeous videos that all of a sudden there's writing that walks in, right? And oh, it's perfect. And now it's all worked out. And you're thinking in your head, like, I can never make that. Like, how am I doing that? But then with Screencastify's tools, you can, right? Like, it's really easy to. And I think also a big takeaway from Screencastify that I always hope implementers walk away with is you also, again, you don't have to be perfect, right? Kids don't want perfect, they want you. So it's okay if you mess up your words, right? And you have to do it. I always tell them it's okay if one of your pets makes a surprise appearance because mine always do. And they will start barking their heads off. Bless them. I'll be like, oh, they're reminding you to use your strategies. Make sure you're taking your notes. And it's okay to pause that video. It's okay to redo a recording. Really just giving yourself that comfort because I think as teachers, we are always hard on ourselves. But I think we're especially hard on ourselves when we see that instruction, right? When we're recording, because it's a little bit new, right? Maybe it's feeling a little bit
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. So not only becoming comfortable with Screencastify, right? Becoming comfortable with the tool, which luckily is pretty easy to do, but also becoming comfortable with the idea of recording yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that is often a huge barrier for folks. And I get it. Actually, like, big secret, I don't listen to any of the podcasts. I cannot stand the sound of my own voice, so I've never heard a singular episode. And I think that teachers probably feel the same way. And I did too when I was in the classroom, right? I'm like, why would I want to create this video? It feels like nails on the chalkboard. And it really is around that comfortability level and getting over that hump, right? So lots of times the takeaway that we need is to just try it. Just give it a go. Let's see what happens and see how it resonates with your students and sometimes kind of like seeing them engage with it is exactly what you need to be like, you know what, that was a little uncomfortable, but I'm going to give it another go. And then all of a sudden it starts to become a part of your regular practice and it's another tool in your toolbox.
Yeah, well, and I think also giving yourself permission to take it in baby steps, right? So I always tell people, like, yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
can be rough. Sometimes I'm recording, before school, and our school starts at 7 a.m. So that means it's like 6:30. Miss Moon's face is not always ready to be in the corner of a video at 6:30. Like, we're just not there. But again, how can you connect? Can you put a picture of your pet on one of the slides? Can you tell them what you had for breakfast this morning? That little pieces of
Mm-hmm.
connection. Then as you get more comfortable, you can try different things, right? Maybe you try your video in the corner. Maybe you try out some of the stickers, just those baby steps. And like you said, being able, I think, to see your learners experience it is a huge way to cut down that barrier because there could be a video that you were just like, oh my God, I think that is terrible. And your learners are going to watch it and they're going to move on with their lives and they're going to do well with it. And you're going to be like, okay. And I think that also speaks to how powerful recording your instructional videos can be for your own teaching practice. You said sometimes, you watch it back, oh my God, it's like nails on a chalkboard, right? There's been times, if you guys haven't figured out, I talk a lot, but maybe I'm doing, especially like a social studies or a science video, and I realized like, man, I went on and on for like 9 minutes about the water cycle. Like, whoa, I need to go ahead and reflect and be like, how can I better teach this in a more, efficient way? And so I think that can be really powerful too, being able to reflect on your own practice in a way that we're never able to, right? I mean, like when you're teaching up at the board, you're not able to see yourself in real time and think through everything because you also have a million other things on your mind. So I also think it can be a powerful way to build your teaching practice, being able to see it, reflect on it, and move forward.
Totally. And there are very few opportunities where we get the chance to see ourselves in action. Sometimes I would like set up like a video camera in the back and I would go back and watch it like it's game tape or something like that. But even that sometimes is an awkward experience. But being able to watch that video and have that metacognition where we're thinking about teaching is so cool. And again, that's another way that we just improve our practice without perhaps that being the main goal of creating those videos. So I love that you brought that up. So you have shared so many dimes, but before we wrap up our discussion, we have a segment here where we ask every one of our heroes to share some tips and advice for teachers. And I want to ask a question of you that is about mastery-based learning, about self-paced learning. So not just with video, but somebody who is on this path and wants to implement some of these tenets. What are the first 2 or 3 things that they should do?
Awesome. So the first thing I would say is just jump in and give yourself permission to jump in. It might crash and burn one day. It might not. That's okay. You are being brave. You're doing your absolute best to try to better your practice for your students, and that's fabulous. So go ahead and give yourself permission. The second thing is please know that you're not alone. There are so many people out there to help you. Our Facebook group, which I highly recommend you join the Modern Classrooms Facebook group if you're interested in something like this, has over 12,000 members. So we're able to share advice, share pictures, share videos, all of that sort of stuff, along with gaining access to the Modern Classrooms free course, which has instructional videos and training on everything that we've talked about. So number 2 would be to know that you're not alone. And 3, I would say to really invite your students in with the process. I think a lot of times when we as teachers try something new, whether it be mastery-based, self-paced, blended instructional learning, whether it be trying even just a new type of textbook or trying, like whatever it is that we try, I think a lot of times we as teachers are the ones that are not only leading that, but are also the ones reflecting on it. And we've kind of already touched on, there's sometimes that you walk away from a lesson and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know what I just did. And it was rough. But then you would ask, some of your learners and they'd be like, well, it was okay. Maybe not your best, but I'm cool with it, And so I think really inviting your students in will, A, again, make sure that you know that you're not alone. And B, I think it can just give you more of a realistic idea of what's happening. Because again, teachers are hard on themselves, right? So you might end, your first day trying it thinking, oh man, I need to fix this and I need to fix this and I need to fix this. But talking to your learners, you might find that either A, they're focused on something completely different, or B, they thought it went great and it worked really well for them. And at the end of the day, it's about our learners, right? And so I would say, out of all of those 3 things, I would really, really encourage you to really bring your learners into the process. So whether it be, hey, give me a 3-2-1 of how we did today, or give me a glow and grow. What's something that you loved about our instruction today? What's something that you wish we could grow and improve upon? I think when you start having those conversations, not only do you have a better handle on what is happening within your room, but that also really strengthens that relational capacity between the educator and learner, which is going to lead to increased learning outcomes because of that relationship.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I love that as a tip, right? To one, dive right in and give it a go, whether that is in a small way or in a big way, but also to let our students in on the secret, right? To say, like, hey, I'm trying this thing out. I don't know how it's going to go. I think it's going to go well. I think you're going to like it, but let's try it together. Let's see what's up. And then your students are a part of your circle along with the 12,000 new friends you met on Facebook as part of the MCP group. So I think that is such a, to borrow a word from you, sustainable way to try it out. So I really like that those are the 3 steps that you sort of left us with. One more question before we take you off the hot seat here. Outside of MCP sources, What are some of your favorite online resources, like the things that you are just diving into, part of your community to better your practice?
Oh, this is a tough question. Honestly, my first thought was Edutopia. I just absolutely
Really?
adore
Okay.
what a wide range of things they have.
Mm.
And typically, Edutopia is kind of like my first starting point, and then I'll dive into something, right? So I'll see, because Edutopia uses a lot of instructional videos, tying it all full circle with everything. But they have a lot of 60-second videos, 2-minute videos that
Mhm.
have kind of showcase you something, and then we can dive deeper into it. That's how a lot of people come to modern classrooms because we did an Edutopia video with them. And now, people watch that video and then they dive in. So I think, finding little things can always be really powerful. Mine is Edutopia. Some people's might be TikTok or Instagram,
Mhm.
whatever it is, finding something that kind of gives you access, to use that word again, access to a wide range of things so that way then when something catches your eye, you can kind of dive deeper. I think that's a great way to kind of be exposed to a lot and then just kind of see what speaks to you, right? I mean, we just talked about diving in. There's going to be some things that you look at and you're like, okay, that's cool. And then you're going to walk away and there's going to be other things. And for me, it was MCP that I was like, I have to do this today. Like, I cannot get it off my brain. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it work. And then here we are.
Yeah, Edutopia is the GOAT. They've been around for a long time. God, they have just like such amazing content. But I love the idea of finding some resource that is going to allow you to survey lots and lots of different information and then be able to pick the thing that is your thing. And then you can just sort of latch onto it and go super deep, find out all of the folks who are the scholars in that space. So I love it. Whether it's Edutopia, TikTok, Facebook, Teacher's Lounge, whatever it is for you, find lots and lots of information around it and then be able to figure out the thing that works. Sarah,
Yeah.
I so appreciate you joining EdTech Heroes. Listeners, be sure to connect with Sarah on Twitter. She is at Sarah with an H 16 Moon. Thank you so much for listening. I am your host, Nef Dukes, and I am so looking forward to seeing y'all next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of EdTech Heroes, presented by Screencastify.